Every 26 seconds, a driver collides with an animal on American roadways, resulting in about 200 human deaths every year and killing up to 2 million large animals. A new statewide partnership combined with federal funding aims to lower these numbers. Montana PBS's Joe Lissar shows us the strategy behind making our roads safer for both people and wildlife.
After 24 years on the job, MDT maintenance crew chief Rusty Burt no longer notices the smell. Five days a week, he and his employees at the Hamilton Maintenance Department cruise the highways looking for animals that have met an unfortunate yet not uncommon demise.
Yeah, just leave those uncovered and we'll cover them up when we get there.
The carcasses become compost. That's about all that can be done after the fact. But now, more light is being shown on ways to mitigate collisions before they happen. Montana has the second highest rate of wildlife vehicle collisions in the nation, behind West Virginia. According to data collected by the Montana Department of Transportation, maintenance crews collected 6,000 carcasses in 2020. That figure is certainly an undercount, as not all animals die right where they're hit. Along with the obvious safety hazards that animals on roadways pose, collisions with large animals are costly. Between animal removal, medical costs, and vehicle repairs, the average cost of a deer vehicle collision is about $8,000, $25,000 for an elk, and around $45,000 for a moose. Animals lose out as well. Roads form barriers to their movement and fragment their habitat. And as human populations increase and development continues, these collisions are becoming more frequent. But there's an effective and well-documented way to greatly reduce the numbers of these collisions.
They work very well. We've got research that proves it.
Wildlife crossing structures, combined with fencing to guide animals to them, have been shown to reduce collisions by as much as 97%. MDT's Environmental Bureau Chief, Tom Martin, says Montana's original land stewards brought forward these solutions in the late 90s.
Well, the Confederation Salish and Kootenai tribe had a different way of looking at the highway. It was, the highway was a visitor on the landscape, and it wasn't going to be a permanent thing. It's just there for a while, and that was their viewpoint.
CSKT tribal leaders told MDT that they wouldn't approve a lane widening project on US Highway 93 unless steps were taken to mitigate impacts on wildlife. MDT crash data was combined with native knowledge of animal movements, and construction began, resulting in one of the densest clusters of animal crossings in the U.S. The project was lauded across the country.
We took what we were learning there, even at the same time, and started incorporating that south of Missoula. And so what you'll see now is over 40 crossings, accommodations south of Missoula, as well as over 40 north of Missoula. And now we have over 125 crossings, accommodations statewide.
Martin is careful to make the distinction between crossing and accommodation. While the majority of accommodations in the state are underpasses, measures also include vegetation reduction near roadways, wildlife-friendly fencing, or lecture mats, like this one on Highway 287 where it crosses the Missouri River.
It's like a prohibitive walkway that goes on the edge of exclusionary fencing. So if an animal steps on it, they get an electrical shock, not enough to hurt them, but enough to startle them, and it'll repel them back from getting caught in between.
But of all the accommodations MDT uses, the most effective are also the most expensive. Large mammal underpasses cost between $250,000 and $600,000. Overpasses between $1 and $7 million, and the proper fencing costs around $50,000 per mile. If an accommodation is built in Montana, it's because it gets tacked on to an existing project, like bridge repair or lane widening. This means wildlife crossing-specific projects, like the one on Highway 93, have become the exception rather than the rule. But 2023 will bring big changes to the way wildlife crossing projects are funded and implemented. The 2021 Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act injected billions of dollars into 15 transportation programs and expanded their eligibility for wildlife crossing projects. It also created the Wildlife Crossing Pilot Program. the first ever federal program dedicated entirely to wildlife crossing structures. This money is set to become available later this year.
Yeah, these federal programs are absolutely transformative. So this marks a real paradigm shift in which wildlife considerations are being incorporated into transportation planning at a whole nother level than existed previously.
After it was signed, Anna Wearn, with the Center for Large Landscape Conservation, dug into the text of the bill to figure out how transportation departments and local governments could get in on the action.
Our coalition has been doing outreach with interested applicants to make sure that they're aware of the funding opportunities, they're aware of the grant criteria, and they're aware of best practices for designing wildlife crossing structures so that they can put forth a competitive proposal for what is hopefully a successful project.
Wearn has high hopes for these new federal resources. She believes successful projects will demonstrate their value and lead Congress to solidify the new pilot program and increase funding in the next infrastructure bill.
And so it's really encouraging to see this groundswell of support and momentum building.
Support and momentum is also building at the state level. In the coming weeks, MDT will unveil a new mapping tool that combines different data streams to highlight areas of concern on Montana highways. And later this year, an entirely new process for getting wildlife accommodations on the ground will begin. It will allow anyone, from city governments to private landowners, to bring wildlife-specific plans to MDT, bypassing the need for an existing highway project.
We're hoping that'll really engage a lot of other stakeholders and help us get more wildlife accommodations on the ground. Pretty exciting.
Wearn says this issue is rare in that it has bipartisan support and clear solutions. And now with more resources right around the corner, she believes action is bound to follow. And with action, perhaps fewer pickups for crews like Rusty's.
Clearly, there is more work that needs to be done. And now is the time to invest in and engage in those partnerships, those projects, those processes to really drive forward and propel these efforts to bring proven solutions here to Montana that will reduce wildlife vehicle collisions and improve habitat connectivity.
For Impact, I'm Joe Lassar.
Beyond being struck and killed by cars, roads fragment animal habitats, affecting their ability to find food, reproduce, and migrate. Rob Ament from the Western Transportation Institute says accommodating wildlife benefits the entire landscape.
So if an animal or a group of animals are restricted from crossing a road, what effects does that have on those animals?
Well, as you isolate populations, it becomes more difficult. Say a wildfire comes in and they can't leave that habitat, or the habitat's transformed, it's charred, there's no food left. So you can see why animals need to move for the seasons, for food, for shelter. So there's many reasons why we always have to make sure that animals are safe to move about the landscape so that they can fulfill their needs, both daily, seasonally, and then the long term, what we call gene flow, so that young adults can disperse and find new mates and keep the gene pool healthy.
So let's talk about migratory big game animals, deer, elk, moose, pronghorn, those sorts of animals. Roads and human development are making it harder and harder for them to complete these migrations that they've done for thousands of years. So how do disruptions from roads impact migratory species and the ecosystem as a whole?
Yeah, as many of those species, as researchers have put radio collars or GPS collars on the animals and see their movement, there's been a lot of information showing how our busiest highways are actually creating a total barrier, or at least a partial barrier, to their crossing of the road. So basically, busy highways continue to fragment and make the usable habitat into smaller and smaller pieces. So that's why the mitigation measures, such as wildlife overpasses and underpasses, not only reduce the collisions for motorists, but they allow that connectivity and that ability for wildlife to continue on their historical migratory pathways.
So wildlife overpasses are among the most effective solution, but they're also the most expensive solution. And you've done some research into finding ways to make these structures more cost-effective, more affordable, which would hopefully result in more of them being built. So can you tell us a little bit about some of those findings?
Yeah, wildlife crossings are expensive, relatively speaking, but depending on what the crash rates are with the wildlife, they can actually be a smart investment. But still, as like anything, we always want to do things more effectively and more cost efficiently. And so we're always looking at new designs. A new project we've been working at Western Transportation Institute is looking at new materials instead of the traditional concrete and steel. We know how long it takes to build a bridge on a highway, sometimes up to 6 months, et cetera. You have to stop traffic. We've been looking into fiber reinforced polymer bridges. In Europe, they've built these wildlife overpasses with this new material, and they're actually, with just traditional machinery, they can just drop the overpass in 4 to 8 hours. So you can imagine, and it's lightweight, so it can be shipped on a truck, semi-trailer. So we have actually been in a design. It hasn't been built, but we've come up with the very first design for North America on a project in Northern California.
Cool. So scientists are able to study the movements of animals in quite great detail, like you explained, and we know that these crossings are extremely effective. So the science is there, the solutions are clear. Are you hopeful that we as a species will be able to embrace these solutions and keep the world, the American West and the world as connected as possible?
Yeah, I think in the last 20 years I've been active in this field. There's been tremendous transformation from, again, the common line, overpasses are too expensive. Actually, they're really smart investments in particular locations. So I think that society wants to have healthy wildlife populations. We're sort of a wildlife culture here in Montana. We want to share our landscapes with all these wonderful species, and so we just need to invest with our roads, invest in the kind of things that make it safe for both us and for our wildlife.
As the population continues to grow in Gallatin County, Western Transportation Institute is in its first phase of a project to assess the stretch of highway between Four Corners and Big Sky.